2020 කන්ද උඩරට ඇසල මහා පෙරහර සන්නිවේදන දායකත්වය අපේ මනුදම් යහගුණදම් මතු පරපුරටත් සන්නිවේදනය කරමු. ශ්‍රී ලංකා ටෙලිකොම් වෙතින් සදහම් පණිවිඩයක්. විකාශන දායකත්වය බැතිසිත් දායකත්වය
අපේ රටේ අනාගතයට රැකවරණය ශ්‍රී ලංකා ඉන්ෂුරන්ස් පියකුමින් මවකමින්
ලංකා බැංකුව නව්‍යකරණයෙන් ඉදිරියටම මහජන බැංකුව මහජනතාවගේ බැංකුව හෙමු එයයි වත්කම අපට ආදරණීය මව්බිම සමග මැලිබන් හැමදාමත්
DSI සුපර් ස්පෝර්ට් නියම ඔරිජිනල් පාසල් පාවාන්
කොහේ ගියත් ඔබේ අතේ තිබුණු දෙයක් අතහරින්න කලින් දෙපාරක් හිතන්න. ඔබට දළදා සමිඳු පිහිටයි.
තවත් තෑගිරාශයක් දරුදිරි සම්පත ජාතික ලුතරයි මණ්ඩලය. මැදිකරගත් බිස්කට් කමිලිවලින් වටු එලිෆන්ට් හවුස් වන්ඩර් චොක් ෂොක්.
A journey awaits.
මුල් පවුලට සතුට සදන සිඟ අති විශිෂ්ට විශ්වාසය. සේෆ්ගාඩ් නිරෝගිමත් දෙවියකට.
Now you are watching the world most historical and the cultural event Candy Esala Pirahara live from the royal city of Kandy.
ඔබ සැමට උතුම් දළදා සමිඳු සරණයි. ඓතිහාසික කන්දෝඩරට ඇසල පෙරහැර මහා මංගල්‍යයේ සිව්වන රන්දෝලි පෙරහර විදි සංචාරය කිරීම සඳහා සියලු කටයුතු සූදානම්. මල්වතු අස්ගිරි ඔබේ මහා විහාරීය මහානායක මහින්පාණන් වහන්සේලාගේ අවවාද අනුශාසනා පෙරදැරිව ශ්‍රී දළදා මාලිගාවේ ගරු දේවර් නිලමේතුමන් සිව් මහා දේවාලයන්හි බස්නායක නිලමේතුමන්ලාගේ සංවිධාන ශක්තියින් පෙරහැර සංවිධානය වෙනවා. මේ අසිරිමත් පෙරහැර මංගල්‍යයෙන් නරඹන්ට මෙවර මහජනතාවට ඉඩ ප්‍රස්තාවක් හිමි නොවන්නේ අයහපත් සෞඛ්‍ය තත්ත්වය නිසාවෙන්. කෙසේ නමුත් අද දවසේ මේ පෙරහැර මංගල්‍ය මහනුවර විදි සංචාරය කිරීමට නියමිතයි. අද දවසේ ඉන්දිරාජ හස්තියා පෙරහැර කරුණ වහන්සේ වැඩම කිරීමට නියමිත අතර දෑලේ ඇතුන් ලෙස මියන් රාජා සහ බුරුම රාජා ගමන් කිරීමට නියමිතයි. උඩරට නර්තන සම්ප්‍රදායේ නර්තනාංගයන්ගෙන් පෝෂිත වූ මේ මාහගේ පෙරහැර සංස්කෘතියේ අසිරියත් විඳින්නට නිවසේ සිටින ඔබට අපි ආරාධනා කරනවා. අපි දැන් සජීවීව සම්බන්ධ වෙනවා ඓතිහාසික කඳුඩරට ඇසල පෙරහැර මහා මංගල්‍යයේ සිව්වන රන්දෝලි පෙරහැර සමගින්.
සියලු දෙනාටම කන්ද ශ්‍රී දළදා හාමුදුරුවන්ගේ ගිහි භාරකාරත්වයේ දරන වත්මන් දේවන්න නිලමේතුමන් පෙරහැර වීදිසරන්ට පෙර పూర్වයෙන් මේ සියලු පාර්ශවයන් සඳහා වූ ආශිර්වාදය ලබා දෙනවා. ඉන් අනතුරුව වැඩ හිඳින
And now we see the Dewan Nilame taking the keys to be handed over to the officiating bhikkhus.
පාතමාලයෙන් උඩමාලයට එන දියවඩන නිලමේතුමන් පෙරහැර වීදි සැරීමට
and now making his way from the upper level to the lower level of the temple of Tooth Relic, the Dewala Nilame ceremoniously and reverentially takes the Dalada casket under the protection of the chief incumbent of the Malwatu Mahaviharya, Venerable Tibbatuave Medankara Nayaka Thero, to the ceremonial tusker. We see the ceremonial casket being carried under much veneration and devotion to take the streets of the Candian kingdom.
And now, it's a moment when the Pirahar casket is placed within the Ranhilige, mounted on the adorned tusker, who will add color and glamour to the fourth Randoli Perahera today.
The Pirahar casket, containing 32 relics of Lord Buddha, has to be securely mounted on this great tusker so that he can conduct his duties properly.
And this is the devout moment when the great tusker steps majestically down from the Mahavahal Kada to the Sandagala in preparation to walk the streets of the city. And today he steps on the white pavada or the white carpets, marking the commencement of the fourth Randoli procession, and this tusker is none other than the Indiraja tusker.
And you are seeing aerial pictures of this historical Senkadagala kingdom being lit and illuminated with thousands of light on this fourth Randoli Perahera.
Walking up front with the sound of whips piercing through the skies are the whip crackers. The annual Pirahar, which is held in the month of Esala, is believed to trigger the monsoon. So these whip crackers symbolize the thunder which precedes the rain.
Indeed, and another reason behind these whip crackers taking the lead of this Pirahara is to announce that the procession has started. And the whipmaster clears the way for the sacred casket and the king in ancient times. However, during present days, it is the Dewala Nilame, the lay custodian of the sacred tooth relic, who is being cleared the streets for.
As we mentioned earlier as well, in single file, these whip crackers wield their whips to notify the citizens of the impending approach of the sacred casket.
This 2-meter long whip, as you can see, has to be carefully manipulated without hurting his colleagues or the onlookers. Many onlookers will throw thousands of coins to the streets in the belief that this will ward off any evil from the loved ones and for blessings from the sacred tooth relic. However, this year there aren't any onlookers to throw coins due to the restrictions implemented. we need to be thankful that under the guidance and advice of the Honorable Dewad Nilame, Pradeep Nilanga Dala, this Pirahara in the year 2020 was conducted for 9 consecutive days, and today is the 4th Randoli Perahera.
As we mentioned earlier too, the sound produced by these whips is quite similar to the sound of lightning strikes. The reason for using this particular symbol in the Dalada procession is to pay homage to rain gods, requesting to bless our crops and cultivations with rain. Today, this group of whip crackers are being led by Upali Jayaratna.
The whip master's duty is handed down from generation to generation of their respective clans. And according to our traditions, Piraharas that do not have this pedigree are not even being called such. It is indeed a great responsibility bestowed upon them to take the lead, to clear the way for the sacred Dalada Toothrilik, taking the streets of this Candian kingdom on this beautiful moonlit night.
Indeed, it's truly amazing to see how these whip crackers carefully manipulate their whips without hurting their colleagues.
And as you can see, the whip masters, as they whip their long whips, the ends come undone. And they have to constantly keep repairing these edges to carry on their duties and to produce that sound of thunder.
Just as lightning flashes across the skies, the Pirahara too has its flashes of light dancing across the faces of the viewers. This is the offering of fire to the gods to water our lands with rain.
The lightning which comes with the rains is indeed a phenomenon of nature. And on this 4th Randoli Perahera, it is magnificently depicted by these skilled and dedicated fireball dancers.
We can see that this group of fireball dancers consists of very young children as well. And this shows the tradition which is passed down through generations.
Indeed, And it also shows that age is not a restriction when it comes to the devotion and respect these individuals have for the sacred Dalada tooth relic.
The fireballs of these dancers are wielded in rotational forms, painting the night with varied patterns of light, thus illuminating the entire procession.
The sun, moon, earth, universe, solar month, night and day are all cyclic. And the fire dancers, by their fire play, highlight these universal cycles and how they burn and cool us in our life cycles.
The fire dancers need to be completely focused and immersed in their art, keeping their minds and bodies one-pointed as they create their cyclic patterns of fire. This is because the slightest inattention could result in disaster.
We see these fire dancers taming their metal cyclic frames of fire with their hands, feet, and performing acrobatics, which shows their skill and artistry which has been handed down from generation to generation.
Of course, the true import of these dancers is seen when a large group of them perform, simultaneously merging their various fiery elements into an amazing display of light and heat. This tradition is usually handed down from generation to generation, with individuals of all ages, from the very young to the very old, taking part in the display of this kingly heritage.
The taming of fire as such might or would conjure fear in a certain person's mind. Yet it has to be noted that these young children and these adults perform this after much practice, and they are skillful in their art.
The dancers are seen creating their paintings of fire across the night sky as they move in procession. For the children, it is a fire play, and for the experienced elders, it is a devout, committed fire dance.
Speaking of this fire dance, we see these fire dancers tame these fiery frames horizontally, vertically, and in 3 frames, or rather planes. We say them throw up these fiery flames up into the sky, and as they descend down with velocity, it reflects and represents lightning which strikes the ground.
Reminding us of the fact that this procession is a procession of great national value. We see a national flag coming into our sight with the Buddhist flag bearers.
The sight of Buddhist flag creates a sense of tranquility on the onlookers, reminding them that this is a celebration, devotion, and an offering to Lord Buddha. The Buddhist flag is a symbol of faith and peace. The 6 colors of the flag represents the colors of the aura that emanated from the body of Lord Buddha when he attained enlightenment under the Bo tree.
The white-clad flag bearers remind the people of the way the Buddha's Dhamma impacts their lives and the way to obtain in release from the cycle of life. And it is to be noted that these flag bearers are representing the open prison of Pallekele.
And this is a very good example of how Lord Buddha's Dharma and great virtues would calm the undisciplined and wayward minds and focus them on this procession of love and compassion radiating across the universe. Speaking of this hexacolored flag, the horizontal strips represents the races of the living world, of the world living in harmony, while the vertical strips represents eternal world peace. And in whole, these colors represents the perfection of Buddhahood and Dhamma.
And now we see coming into our sight the cloth or the provincial flag bearers.
According to the traditions of the Candian era, the Nilame is in charge of the provinces of the Candian kingdom, which comes under the ruling of the Bhupati or the Senkadakala king, used to carry their respective provincial flags and parade in the procession. It was also a political symbol, and to symbolize that, we still have the provincial flags in the Kandy Esala Pirahara, taking the streets of this Candian kingdom.
And now we see the representatives of the Korale divisions and state officials of Kanda Udarata with their provincial flags flying high.
The first is the sun and the moon flag of Satar Korale. Next comes the lion flag of the Sat Korale. Then in line is the white flag of Matale, the Sabaragamo silk flag, the flag with the Berunda Pakshya or the mythical bird of the Tunkorale, the flag of the peacock of Uvavalpane, and the flag of the lotus flower of Udapalata.
And now the brass standard bearers are coming into our sight. The brass Disa flags or the brass provincial flags represent the glory of Senkadagala once again.
Goldsmiths, silversmiths, and the brassmiths belonged to the same clan or the Gurukula, which is called as the Navandanna clan. As you can observe, they used to make beautiful ornaments with very detailed engravings and embedded with precious gems to adorn the sacred tooth relic and the king.
Of course, they are the ones who made the gold ornaments for the pageant as well as the gold and silver work for the king.
And with the durability of the brass flag, the kings of old offered their hope of similar durability and sustainability to the nation. This reflects how this Pirahara was closely related with kingship and the administration of the country.
These sword bearers symbolize the protection given to the entire procession. The Dalada Perahera is a procession aimed at reducing and eradicating sorrow and sadness, and these sword carriers represent the glory of the ancient Senkadagala kingdom.
With the Peramune leading the way, the first elephant in today's fourth Randoli Perahera is Banda, belonging to the Honourable Dewala Nilame of the Sri Dalada Maligawa, Pradeep Nilanga Dela.
The duty of the Peramune Rala leading the elephant procession is to inform the citizens of the country that the procession is being carried out in accordance with the directives of the scroll.
Next in line are the 4 Haves drum beaters who are permanently seconded to the service of the Dalada Maligawa.
The Havisi ensemble, the avant-garde drummers representing the traditional orchestra of Sinhala music, known as the Panchaturiyanadaya, 5-fold musical instruments. 4 of the 5 types of instruments are represented here. Dewala, the long cylindrical drum. Tammatama, the 2-faced kettle drum played with 2 sticks. Thalamata, the small hand cymbals that keep the timing. And Horanava, the traditional horn, all combined together makes an orchestral sound that makes the entire pageant move forward in harmony. They play traditional rhythm patterns known as Gaman Havisi. It goes like this. Jing. 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 Drummers from 4 main generations, Ihalavela, Molagoda, Uduvela and Malagammana, who were assigned by the king to pay homage to the sacred tooth relic, are represented here today. For generations, they have with great devotion carried this duty on to date.
The Gajanayaka Nilame arrives as the royal official in charge of the king's troop of elephants, and it is the position given to him directly by the king himself. And now he is carrying his emblem of his office.
And this majestic tusker belongs to Venerable Alutnuwara Anuruddha Theru of the Kotte Rajamahawihara, and his name is Raja.
And this is called the Dance of Beetle or the Bulat Padea.
These dancers dance with a handful of beetle leaves. A handful of beetle leaves is a symbol of welcome or an offering. This dance carrying beetle leaves is in fact quite a recent addition to the Dalada Perahera from the ancient ritual Kohomba Kankariya. Even though the Bulat Pade dance is performed as a solo dance in the traditional ritual, here it has become a beautiful group dance in the Pirahar.
This icon, which was introduced during the times of Venerable Valivita Sangaraja Theru, the first Buddhist flag which is bought of a tusker, is to symbolize that this is truly a Buddhist procession, and this magnificent tusker is none other than Janaraja, belonging to the Sri Dalada Maligawa stables.
As Janaraja leaves our side, up next we see a group of fan dancers or Chamara dancers.
Chamara or the tussle dance is a popular folk dance that symbolizes fanning to gently blow cool air, providing comforts to the sacred tooth relic.
dancers are led by Nimesh Sumanaratna.
The continuous rise and fall of these fans is a gentle and joyful sight to the people who are triggered towards wholesome and devotional thoughts, watching this Dalada procession from home.
The long white tassels are considered an auspicious sight.
And the simultaneous rise and fall of the fans is a gentle and joyful sight to people who are triggered towards wholesome and devotional thoughts.
Once the retired mascot of the Sri Lanka Army, and now one of the most majestic elephants decorating our Pirahar procession. His name is Veera, belonging to Venerable Kanangama Narada Thero, the chief incumbent of the Sankapitti Vihara in Dewala.
On the mount of the Veera elephant, we see a canopy, symbolizing the protection provided to the procession.
Veera was gifted to the Sankapitti Vihara in the year 2011 by the former minister Vimal Veeravansha.
We now see a group of Pantera dancers. Pantera is a round metal instrument used by the dancers. It was originally used to keep the beat for the chanting of the Kavikara Maduva, the chamber of versifiers, and was later adapted as a semi-classical Candian dance. Pantera dance is an essentially Buddhist dance originated in the Buddhist culture, performed in traditional rituals such as Sat Satya, Suvisi Vivarana. The dancers sing these sets of poems, all descriptive of the life of the Buddha.
This majestic elephant is Gajabal, belonging to Mr. Ranjit Vijayasinghe of the Moranwatta Dewala in Yakkala.
And now we have a group of coconut flower dancers.
The coconut flower is considered a sign of prosperity. Polmal dance or the coconut flower dance is also an integral part of the traditional Kumbha Kankaria ritual.
And I believe these dances symbolically represents the same bounty and abundance in their dance.
Since the Dalada pageant is the great ceremony that brings timely rains and fertility to the land, these dancers pray for that bounty with their coconut flowers.
And their prayer is that this country, this island nation, continues in peace and prosperity with the blessings of the sacred Tooth Relic.
Intricate steps and movements that they execute represent the classical repertoire, dance repertoire of the Candian dance.
And today this group is led by W.M. Dayananda.
Following them, we have one of the most usual participants of the Kandy Esala Perahera. His name is Muthu. Muthu belongs to Venerable, the chief incumbent of the Muthiyang Rajamahawihara, Venerable Murundeniye Dhammaratana Theru.
On Muthu's mount too, we see another canopy bearer, once again symbolizing the protection provided to this entire procession.
And now in this fourth Randoli procession, we are seeing the first Nayandi dancing troupe taking the streets of this Candian kingdom.
Dancers just finished a stimulating dance segment called Kastiram, which is performed at the end of a set of dance steps. Nayandi is the name of this particular costume, which consists of the lower part of the vest costume, yet omits the headgear and is replaced with a simple turban.
Two officials carrying Burmese flags, the two elephants who are colleagues, represent the stable of Mr. Udara Galapatti in Kiriyulla. We have Kanchana and Bibila, both who are usual participants of the Kandy Esala Perahera.
This is also one of the most prestigious segments in the entire Dalada procession. And we have the first group of Thumb beaters.
Tammatama is a traditional drum, usually performed in combination with the Dewala. In the grand repertoire of Sinhala dancers, there are 9 types of dances, and this particular Thammattam dance falls into the category of Thala Nattum, which represents the percussive rhythms and the movements done accordingly, representing the beats, the rhythmic patterns of the Thammattam.
And this group of Thammattam players is led by Sujit Anand.
Following this troupe of Thammattam players, we have the youngest participant of the Sri Dalada Perahera in this 4th Randoli procession. Her name is Ganga. Ganga belongs to Venerable Galabodanyani Saratero, the chief incumbent of the Gangarama Vihara in Punupitiya, Colombo.
Up next, we have a group of Talampata or cymbal players.
Thalam dance is one of the most popular folk dances of Sri Lanka. The main purpose of the Thalampata or the little hand cymbals is to keep the beat for drumming or dancing. Here, this popular folk dance falls into the category of Rupa Nattum out of the 9 types of dances found in the Sinhala dance repertoire. Rupa Nattum literally means picturesque dances.
And of course, the musical sound which is produced by clapping the 2 brass lids of the Thammattam of the Thalampata is an offering to Lord Buddha as well as the sacred tooth relic.
The yellow piece of silk attached to these symbols adds much color and beauty to their majestic and beautiful dance patterns.
The dance represents the celebration of the glory of Lord Buddha.
This young tusker, draped in a majestic yellow costume, is Sindhu. Sindhu was gifted to the Mahanayaka Thero of the Malvatta chapter, Venerable Tibbatuave Sri Siddhartha Sumangala Thero, in the year 2009 by former President Mahinda Rajapaksha in the year 2009.
And this is also one of the most awaited segments in the Dalada procession. This group of tambourine players practice their art or showcase their art in front of the people. Back then it was a tradition to showcase their art in front of the people, but with the circumstances, with the given situation, even though there are no weavers in the streets of Kandy, still they managed to showcase their talent and the skills to the weavers.
This particular presentation is called Raban Kridava. There are three main types of tambourines or rabanas found in Sri Lanka. The large bench rabana, which is played usually in the Sinhala New Year's time. The Viridu Rabana or the small hand Rabana that accompanies the Viridu songs, a kind of folk songs. And this particular Rabana is called Karakavana Rabana, which is used for the Raban Kridava or the sport of Raban. The peak point of the performance, the entire performance here, is that the little performer in the middle who would be spinning a set of rabang balanced on the sticks. One set in his mouth and two other rabangs on both hands.
Indeed, and looking at the skill of this small child, we can only imagine the great artistry that this child will be bestowed when he grows up to be a talented and more experienced tambourine dancer.
We can also say that this spinning rabana is a symbol for impermanence of our life. It reminds us that we may lose our life in an instant, in the same way that the rabana breaks free from the rod.
This young elephant behind us is the youngest of the stable of the Mutiyangana Rajamaha Viharaya in Badulla, belonging to Venerable Murundeniye Dhammaratana Thero. His name is Madhu. Madhu was once a baby elephant who was caught in a snare in the wilds of Dewala, and later, after much care and medication, he was gifted to the Mutiyangana Rajamaha Viharaya.
you see that neither the body or the mind moves as fast as this spinning rabana, and great skill is required to beautifully and carefully manipulate this instrument.
With the canopy on Madhu's mount, again symbolizing the protection provided to the upcoming casket, Madhu leaves our sight. And up next, we are about to see another precious segment in the Pirahara. This segment, in fact, symbolizes or reminds us of the agrarian society which prevailed back then in this island nation.
This folk dance that combines 4 types of folk traditions in the Sinhala dance is in fact a fairly modern creation. Usually the dancers who carry these different instruments, the fans, the tussles, the sticks and the rabanas, dance separately. But here the choreography creates interesting pictures with the different instruments moving with the dancers at different times to different rhythmic patterns, making beautiful and complex dance patterns, flow patterns, or formations.
And this group of mixed folk dancers is being led by P.C.B. Vijayasuriya.
As we see, these folk dancers are characterized apart from the other classical dance forms by their colorfulness, joyfulness, diversity of dancers and the dancing patterns, energy and the speed. And this speaks of how folk dancers represented and were performed merely for entertainment.
This elephant is Sita. Sita belongs to Mrs. Nilanthi Veerasinghe of Maligawa.
We have a group of Pantera Dancers.
The costume of the Pantera Dancers is a simple cloth, the turban, a few bangles, and sometimes a talisman on the right hand. It is the simplicity of the costume that makes these acrobatic movements easy for the performers to execute them.
I also believe the light weight of the thin circlet of the Pantera further helps them to carefully manipulate their hands and perform this dance.
These two elephants are having officials carrying Burmese flags. Rani is a name which is used in the English language with the word of queen. Both of these elephants are two queens. Their names are Rani. One Rani belonging to Mr. Chanaka Jayasekara of Pallebedda and the other to Mr. S.M. Samaranayaka of the Kandy Dewala in Velambada.
And this is also another dancing segment which holds a special place in the Dalada celebrations.
This beautiful drum dance is called the Udaki Dance. A traditional dance using the small hourglass-shaped drum, Udaki. This drum was also initially used to accompany the panegyric songs of the Kavikara Maduwa, or the chamber of versifiers, and later developed as a dance form.
And as you may hear, a speciality of these performers is that they play the instrument and join the procession while chanting songs or verses that are dedicated to the great qualities and virtues of Lord Buddha.
The Udaki is also played as one of the instruments in the daily rituals of the sacred Dalada tooth relic.
One of the signature movements of the Udaki dance is the swirling of the long tussle.
One of the guardian tuskers who are parading a few steps ahead of the ceremonial tusker. This is the prince of the Sri Dalada Maligawa stables, Singharaja, gifted in the year 1995 by the Sri Lanka Army.
And this is the troupe of Nayandi dancers that we see in the first segment, the Dalada Perahera segment of the procession.
The Nayandi dancers also represent a long-standing tradition in the Kandy Pirahar. Long before the West dance proper was introduced to the Kandy Pirahara, to the Dalada Perahera, it was the Nayandi dancers who drove the main attraction of the Dalada Perahera as they performed intricate classical dance patterns.
I believe it was in 1919 that the West dancing troops were introduced to the Esala Perahera.
The Nayandi dance is also hereditary to the upcountry, and it has to be learned before the West Natuma or the West dance. This was in fact used as a debut for a West dance.
three of the most majestic elephants who are taking part in the Dalada Perahera in this fourth Randoli procession. In the middle, we have Salia belonging to Venerable Urlayavatte Dhammarakita Thero of the Mahiyagan Rajamaha Viharaya, accompanied by Raja belonging to Mrs. Sita Senanayaka Mallava of Hettimulla, alongside with Punchibanda, who belongs to Mr. Kitsiri Mewan Belagedara of Panaliya in Polgahavela.
All these three elephants once again carry canopies on their mounts, symbolizing the protection provided to the procession. And this is the iconic dance form in the entire procession.
The West Dance is the grand classical dance of Sri Lanka, hereditary to the upcountry region. The West Dance was nurtured in the ancient Kuhumba Kankarya ritual and is considered as the main dance form of the Dalada Perahera.
This group of West dancers, or in fact the first group of West dancers, is being led by Ishant Ihalavela and Lasantha Vansekara.
Origin or the birth of West Dance traces back to the time of King Pantukavera, the king of Panduasnura.
The legend has it that when King Panduasdev fell ill from a curse made by Queni, a ritual was performed to cure him. It is in that ritual that the West Dance was nurtured in for over 2,500 years.
And now we see the Karya Korala being welcomed by this West Dance troupe. And the Karya Korala is the second in command of the Dewala Nilame and is a heritage position given by the royal decree.
What you are about to see now is the highlight of the entire procession. We see the ceremonial tusker Indiraja, who belongs to Sridada Maligawa elephant stables, lavishly adorned in golden costumes, walking majestically on the white cloth carpet or white pavada today in the fourth Randoli procession. And today, he is carrying the sacred Pirahar casket, accompanied by the Tusker group, Mian Raja and Burma Raja.
The Nagasingham players are one of the important features of the Kandy Perahera, as it represents Hinduism as it was assimilated into Buddhist culture. The instruments played here are the long horn, the patahabera, and the tawil drum.
We see this elephant decked in golden ear ornaments, and also his tusks are encased in golden ornaments.
And now we see the chamber of versifiers in the Dalada Maligawa, singing hymns in praise of Lord Buddha as well as the sacred tooth relic.
We see them carry silver castanets, silver panteru and udaki, while singing their verses to the music of their instruments.
In keeping with an age-old tradition, the versifiers chant the virtues of the Buddha, accompanied by the silver udaki or the silver hourglass drum and the silver panteru.
And now we see the flower lantern group, carrying flowers and lanterns as offerings to the sacred Dalada casket or the sacred Perahara casket.
The offering of flowers is a way of respecting and venerating Lord Buddha, and this symbolically represents the offering of flowers for the great virtues of Lord Buddha.
Following the flower lantern group, we now see the second troop of West dancers in the Dalada procession. This troop of West dancers is led by Sanjeeva Verapitiya and Peter Surasena.
Sanjeeva Verapitiya and Peter Surasena hail from two great traditional families of the Candian dance. Verapitiya and Mudadiniya families are well known for their classical execution of the Candian dance. The costume of the West dancer symbolically represents the regalia of King Malaya, the three royal brothers who performed the first Kuhumba Kankariya ritual thousands of years ago. to the stimulus rhythms of the gataberea or the Candian drum, the West dancers execute a typical walking step of the Candian dance.
As you can see, the eyes of these dancers follow the hands and performs stylized eye movements, adding beauty to their dancing style.
And they welcome and pave the way for the Dewada Nilame, or the lay custodian of the Temple of the Tooth. And this is the Dewada Nilame of Sri Dalada Maligawa, Honorable Pradeep Nilangadala. The final responsibility for the whole of this mighty procession rests upon the Dewada Nilame.
We see this West dancing troupe welcoming this honored royal official who symbolizes the king to take the streets of this Candian kingdom.
The honor and respect provided by the Dun Singhale to the king for the land is now given to the Dewada Nilame.
And walking on either side of the Dewada Nilame, we see the guards protecting the Dewada Nilame.
Following him, we also have the leaders or the Vidanes of the 10 villages under the Senkadagala kingdom. All these individuals collectively pay their respect and homage to the sacred Dalada tooth relic. The presence of the Nilame, the Vidanes and the gods are to symbolize the free society of the nation that is under the watchful protection of the king.
And now moving on to the first Dewala procession of this fourth Randoli Perahera, we are seeing pictures of the Natha Dewala premises.
And now the godly ornaments of God Natha are being carried to be placed on the mount of the Tusker, who is privileged today to carry the godly ornaments.
As the godly ornaments are being heralded out, the Hevisi drummers play the Alatipada or the rhythms of blessing.
And coming into our sight once again are the Buddhist flag bearers, once again reminding us that this procession is of religious as well as national importance.
It also has to be mentioned that God Natha is closely associated with Buddhism. And this is because God Natha is believed to be the coming Buddha. the sight of these Buddhist flags creates a sense of unreflecting joy on the part of the people viewing this Kandy Esala procession.
The first elephant to lead the procession of God Natha is with the official carrying the flag of Senkaragal. And this mighty elephant is Rohana. Rohana belongs to Mr. Varuna Kannangara of Horana, who is hailing from a family that is famous in the legend of domestic elephants in the country.
The Pirahar of the Natha Dewala is dedicated to God Natha. Therefore, the color associated with God Natha, which is yellow, could be seen throughout the procession.
Now following this elephant, we see the first Heavy troop, or rather the only Heavy troop of the Natha Dewala Perahera.
Drummers beautifully making spiral and round formations.
The second elephant of the Pirahara of God Natha is with the Gajanayaka Nilame, who is responsible for the fleet of elephants. And this is Taraka. Taraka belongs to the Basnayaka Nilame of the Sri Mahanatha Dewala, Gayan Hinkenda. And the Gajanayaka Nilame today is Sudesh Kolonna, who is also the Basnayaka Nilame of the Pitiye Bandara Dewala in Watapulluwa.
Followed by the elephant adorned in yellow. We can see a group of Savarang dancers is yet another traditional and popular folk dance.
Once again, it is also to be noted that this group of Savarang dancers is also clad in beautiful yellow color, symbolizing the complexion or the color associated with God Natha.
We see how these skillful Savarang dancers make use of this wide streets, all the space in the streets, with their graceful movements using the Savarang.
According to our classical poetry, long white tussles and majestic elephants are considered auspicious signs. dancers are making beautiful circular formations, which is a typical picture of traditional folk dances.
Two of the most majestic elephants in the procession of God Natha, Vijitaraja, belonging to Venerable Millane Siriya Alankara Thero of the historic Dibulagan Rajamaha Viharya, alongside with Kandula, belonging to Mr. S.M. Roshan Patirana of Maharagama.
On their mounts we saw the Buddhist flags.
Here comes a typical Raban dance as against the Raban Krida or the acrobatic Raban handling we saw earlier. The Raban dance is yet another popular folk dance.
Has to be specially mentioned that this Raban dance is performed with the contribution of school students, making an amazing contribution with such vigor and talent.
Of course, it's really amazing to see how these youngsters contribute to the procession, reminding us of the fact and reflecting the fact that this tradition is surely handed down from generation to generation.
Arjuna belongs to Venerable Dikwelle Tissatero, the chief incumbent of the Vaurukana Rajama Viharya, Dikwelle. Arjuna is also a frequent participant of the Sri Mahanatha Dewala
Perahera. Yet another group of energetic thumb-at-thumb players.
This group of thumb-at-thumb players in the Natha Dewala procession is led by Jagat Kumara.
It would be interesting to note that in South India also found a drum with a name that goes close to the thumb-at-thumb called Thambatti.
The heart-warming sight of the mother and the son parading together, Kumari and Bandara, belonging to Mr. Kamal Kitsiri of Kottaval.
And now we are seeing the first West dancing troupe of the Natha Dewala Perahera.
dancers perform a typical movement known as Mendi Matraya, the main stance of the Candian dance. And culminating the movements with a kastirama, an ending phrase.
And this group of West dancers in the Natha Dewala procession is now welcome in the most prestigious tusker in the Natha Dewala procession. We now see the chief trustee of the Natha Dewala parading in the streets of Kandy.
The ceremonial tusker today, carrying the godly ornaments of God Natha, is none other than the tusker bearing the longest tusks in the country, Muturaja, belonging to Venerable Okkavita Vipulasara Thero of the Kandy Vihare in Alutgama, who is accompanied by Kumari, also belonging to Vipulasara Thero, alongside with Rani, belonging to Mr. Nalaka Jayasingha of Godagama.
Yet another group of West dancers, and this is the second West dancing group in the Natha Dewala procession alone.
Since it was introduced to the Esala Pirahar in the year 1919 by the then Diyavadana Nilame P.B. Nugavela Disava, this particular dance form has played a predominant role in the Dalada Perahera.
I believe they carry a legacy of over 100 years dating back from 1919. And this is a stage where they showcase their great skill and artistry to the whole world.
As they make their way through the procession, they create or they execute salutary movements towards the Nilame.
And this is Mr. Anura Iriyagama from Vegiriya Natha Dewala, representing the Basnayaka Nilame of Kandy Natha Dewala, parading in the streets of Kandy today.
It is a great task bestowed upon him to carry on the duties of the Basnayaka Nilame.
And Vegiriya Natha Dewala is a rural shrine attributed to God Natha.
Yet again we see guards walk on either side of the Basnayaka Nilame, showing their respect and protection.
And that ends the first of the four Dewala Piraharas, the Natha Dewala procession. And we are about to see the commencement of the Vishnu Dewala procession.
As the godly ornaments are being brought forward, the drummers beat the Alati Pada or the Ashirvada Pada, the rhythms of blessings.
The procession of the Vishnu Dewale is attributed to God Vishnu, who is thought to be the god overseeing the well-being of the island nation, Sri Lanka.
Indeed. And starting from the first segment of this procession, we see the Pirahar officials being clad in blue. And this is because blue is a color associated with God Vishnu.
And these are the district flags which are being carried in the Vishnu Dewala procession. The vehicle of God Vishnu is considered to be Gurula, which is a mythical bird. And in some of these flags too, we can see the symbol or the vehicle of God Vishnu, which is Gurula.
As part of the customs, the first elephant of the Vishnu Dewala Perahera will be carrying an official with the flag of the Satara Koralaya. And this majestic elephant is Taraka. Taraka belongs to Mr. Kularatna Vijayatunga of the Rankadu Pattini Dewalaya in Kaduwala.
Coming into our sight is the group of heavy beaters in the Vishnu Dewala procession.
The drummer in front with a tussle represent a traditional family, a leading family of drummers.
Now we see the Gajanayak Nilame clad in white, the official responsible for the troop of elephants in the Vishnu Dewala procession. And this elephant is Suranimala, belonging to the Alutnuwara Dadimunda Dewalaya. It is custom that the Basna, the Gajanayak Nilame of the Dewala processions should be carrying a silver ankus, along wearing a white costume.
Symbolizing the act of fanning to God Vishnu or the godly ornaments of God Vishnu. Here comes another group of Savaran dancers.
Clad in blue, the iconic color of God Vishnu, they perform energetic and joyful movements.
Speaking of the Savaran, it is said that in the days of the yore, it was the tail of the Semara deer that lived in India that was used for this purpose. And the air blown through the fine strands of its tail hair was said to be the most refreshing in the world.
The third elephant of the Sri Mahavishnu Dewala Perahera is Kandula. Kandula belongs to Venerable Murundeniya Dhammaratana Thero, the chief incumbent of the historic Mutiyangana Rajamaha Vihare in Badulla.
The Pantera Dancers making their way through the Vishnu Dewala Perahera along the streets. The Pantera is also considered or symbolically represents the weapon of God Vishnu, known as the Sudarshana Chakra.
And further, history books mention that this dance was performed to celebrate victories in the battlefield back in the times of ancient kings.
One can also say that we can see the most authentic or the purest form of the Pantera dance in the Candian tradition.
Like the traditional families of the West dancers, the Pantera dancers also inherit a long-standing family tradition. Traditional families such as the Dehimadua Parampara or the Dehimadua generation have brought forth this great legacy.
And this elephant is Banda, belonging to Mr. Sisira Samarakun of Pulgahavela.
What we see now is the first troupe of wooden stick dancers or the Lee Kelly dancers in the Vishnu Dewala procession.
Stick dance is yet another popular folk dance found in our dance repertoire. Though considered a very playful dance, it also represents the combats of the sword fighters.
And this young elephant is Gamunu, once a mascot of the Sri Lanka army and now belonging to the Pinnawala Elephant Orphanage.
And this is a group of Udaki players in the segment of the Vishnu Dewali.
A special feature in the Udaki dances is that unlike the other traditional dance forms, it is not accompanied by separate drummers, but the dancers themselves play the accompanying rhythms to their movements and the songs sung.
And that's Gagana and Sanju.
We see yet another Pantera dancing troupe take the streets of this city.
These are the two elephants belonging to Mr. Sarat Jayalat of Ratkarauva, None and Kumari. Yet again, two of the most frequent participants, Kandy and Pirahar.
They are also clad in beautiful blue robes, once again reminding us of the color associated with God Vishnu.
It is interesting to note that Buddhism has accommodated gods and deities from other faiths and, more importantly, from Hinduism. Hence, Vishnu is considered a Buddhist god in Sri Lanka. He is also known as Upulvan, god of the blue lotus. yet another Nayandi dance group. Here they perform the steps, holding the pleats on either side of their costume. And this particular movement is called Narumatra. It is interesting to note that every set of movements culminate in a very stimulating and faster speed rhythm pattern and falling back to the slow speed.
Here we have Tikiri belonging to Mr. Jagat Vithana of Matugama, along with Muthu belonging to Mr. Indika Mudunkot of Manikin.
On their mounts too, we see canopies symbolizing protection provided to the Vishnu Dewala procession.
The West dancers performing the Narumatra.
It is a great honor that these West dancers get to perform at this 4th Randoli Perahera, welcoming the godly ornaments of God Vishnu.
Also making salutary hand gestures known as Vandum At or Dekum At.
Clad in gleaming blue, we now see the main Tusker group in the Vishnu Dewala procession.
The ceremonial Tusker today is as usual Rama belonging to Mr. Tudor Gunasekara of Heyanthudua, who is accompanied by Vasana belonging to Mrs. Krishanti Alapatha of Ratnapura, and Mali belonging to Mr. Chatura Vikramanayaka of Horana.
On their robes we see the symbol of God Vishnu. And here comes the second group of West dancers in the Vishnu Dewala procession.
The traditional manner of dancing or performing in the Pirahara is that the dancers behind are always following the two lead dancers on either side.
These West dancers are now paving the way for the Nilames of the rural shrines. Wallahagoda Kataragama Dewale, representing Wallahagoda Kataragama Dewale, we have Mr. Sivalinugegoda, and representing Alavatagoda Saman Dewale, we have Mr. Jayampati Heenkenda, and also Mr. Ruwan Natipula from Ganegoda Kataragama Dewale. All these Nilames are representing the Basnayak Nilame of Vishnu Dewale, Kandy.
And now we are seeing pictures from the Dewale premises of the Kataragama Dewalaya.
It is customary that the rhythms of blessing or alati pada are usually played for 3 times, 7 times, and 9 times.
And under great veneration, we now see the godly ornaments of God Kataragama being brought to be placed on the mount of the Tusker. Taking the lead of the Kataragama Dewali Perahera, we see a group of Buddhist flag bearers.
And their red sash representing the iconic color of God Kataragama, that is red.
The Kataragama Dewala in Kandy had been built in the 14th century and it became more popular in the 16th century. It was dedicated to God Skanda Kumara or God Kataragama. It's believed that the god has 6 faces and 12 hands.
We see these flag bearers take calm and poised steps, progressing on this 4th Randoli Perahera.
The vehicle of God Kataragama is believed to be a peacock, and in these flags too we can see the symbol of peacock printed.
It is indeed beautiful and magical to see how symbolism is portrayed on every element of this Pirahar.
Group of Daul and Thammatam players, accompanied by the Horonava, blowing traditional melodies. They advance forward in a simple step known as Tungadiya. They play a rhythm that goes as The traditional art of drumming is such a developed one that it has a highly codified system of playing, handling the drums, and a system of rhythmic patterns that are complex.
The first elephant of the Sri Maha Kataragama Dewala Perahera is with the Gajanayaka Nilame, responsible for the troop of elephants taking part. And as usual, it is Manike, belonging to Mr. Anuratissa Kempitiya of Kulpane in Kegol, who is leading the way for the procession of God Kataragama.
now we see a very young group of Thalan dancers.
The color worn by most of the participants in the Katharagama Dewala procession is red, since this is the color which is associated with god Katharagama.
It is our tradition that young children are trained in such ceremonial occasions that as they grow, they will flower into fully fledged dancers. Yet another group of young Udaki dancers.
And this is Kapuru, belonging to Venerable Kuttila Anuruddha Thero of the Nagendrarame temple in Veyangoda.
Once again, coming into our sight is a group of Udaki players.
The group consisting of very young boys, it is heartening to see that they perform with great devotion and joy.
This is Kumari, belonging to Mr. Asanka Vijay Singh of Balangoda, who was quite an important character during the Kubal Pirahara festivals, who took part as an accompanying elephant for the ceremonial tusker. And today, Kumari is going in third in the fourth Randoli procession.
This vibrant group of wooden stick dancers is also a very unique dancing segment in the Katharagama Dewala procession.
Though simple, their movements are very, very energetic.
And this energetic dance also symbolically reflects the belief by the majority of Hindus that God Katharagama is the god of war and is believed to be very strong and powerful.
This young elephant here is Vishnu, belonging to the Mahanayaka Thero of the Sri Lanka Ramani Nikaya, Venerable Napane Premasiri Thero. Vishnu was gifted to the Nayaka Thero in the year 2011 by former President Mahinda Rajapaksha.
And this is one of the most awaited segments in the entire procession, the Peacock Dance. The peacock, as we mentioned earlier as well, is the vehicle of god Katharagama. And today, in the Katharagama Dewala procession, we see a set of individuals who are dressed as peacocks, dancing beautifully, performing beautifully in this segment.
Indeed, this section takes a very tight turn from the traditional dancing forms and the culture portrayed throughout the procession we witnessed so far.
One can hear the heady fast beat that is classically associated with these dance forms. It could be said that this Pirahara is greatly influenced, the Katharagama Dewala Pirahara is greatly influenced by the South Indian traditions as well.
The instruments involved in the music ensemble here are the tawil and the snare drums. Of course, the snare drums is a much later addition, but traditionally it had been the traditional South Indian drum called tawil along with the nadaswaram. And today one can see the modern trumpets being blown.
And now we see a Kavadi dancing troupe take the streets of this Candian kingdom.
The dancers express their joy and devotion, yet as if in a trance. And they carry symbolic weapons of God Kataragama.
Indeed, this dancing form is very different to the classical dancing forms we have witnessed so far, with controlled movements. Here, the dancing is almost effortless, and we indeed see the joy and the energy of these dancers.
A sheer expression of their deep devotion.
And we also saw the gradual increase in the pace of the drums and the pitch of the tunes, which came up to this Kavadi dancing troupe.
It's truly beautiful to see how all these segments coexist in this procession. The Buddhist traditions as well as South Indian traditions all combined. The first troupe of West dancers in the Kataragama Dewala procession, led by Dhammika Bandara Tennakon.
Gradually increasing the tempo, the dancers are performing a typical Teita Matraya, as it is known in the Candian dance, a movement that brings the entire segment into a climax.
And I believe this fast dancing phase is called the Odia, if I'm right.
We see a group of Tawil and Nadaswaram players, a typical representation of the Dravidian culture. These are temple drums of South Indian Hindu temples and are also played in the temples dedicated to God Kataragama in Sri Lanka.
And we see the chief trustee of the Kataragama Dewala in Kandy taking the streets of Kandy. His robe is also very unique. It's also designed in a South Indian tradition.
And this ceremonial elephant today is Esala, belonging to Venerable Katugastota Sharada Thero of the Senanayaka Pirivena in Pirisiyala. He is accompanied by Aruna, belonging to Venerable Hikuda Saddhananda Thero of the Handala Rajamahawihara in Vattala, alongside with Sankaraja, belonging to Venerable Kolamageyara Ananda Thero of the historic Sankapala Rajamahawihara in Emilipitiya.
The godly ornaments of God Kataragama are now being carried with much veneration.
Yet another West dancing troupe in this Kataragama Dewala Perahera.
And this group is led by Upananda Talgahagoda.
The Talgahagoda family is known for West dancing as well as traditional Bali ceremony, an age-old traditional ceremony performed to ward off evil caused by planetary deities and is known as the Bali ceremony. This particular movement, holding the naru or the pleats on either side of the dancer's costume, was introduced to the West dance by the renowned dance guru Nittawala Gunaya.
And this group of West dancers in the Kataragama Dewala procession is now welcoming the representatives of the Basnayaka Nilame of the Kataragama Dewala. Today, in the 4th Randoli procession, we have Mr. Ryan Danushka Bandara Valisundara as well as Mr. Gayan Kanishka Bandara Valisundara as the Nilames representing the Basnayaka Nilame of Kandy Kataragama Dewala.
We see two groups of guards giving protection to these Basnayaka Nilames, the representatives of the Basnayaka Nilames.
Reflecting the ancient Candian glory, the Nilames leave our sight, and now it's time to witness the commencement of the Pattini Dewala procession. Goddess Pattini is a deity who commands great respect among most of the citizenry of the country. The only female representation at the Dalada procession is the Pattini Dewala procession.
We see Dewala officials venerating the godly ornaments of Goddess Pattini to take the streets of the Candian kingdom.
And in this segment too, we see the Buddhist flag bearers carrying the Buddhist flags, reminding us of the fact that this celebration is one of a religious nature.
The group of heavy C drummers, the Dawla and Tammatam players, to the accompaniment of the Horanava, or the traditional Sri Lankan horn.
And this is the official AVC group responsible of Thevawa in the Pattini Dewala.
With the tassels hung on the drum are the leaders of the group, those descending from the Panikki family traditions. The drummers are compelled to cover their drums, which partly hinders the beauty of the Pirahara.
Amidst the rains, these drum beaters still try to convey the message of the upcoming Pirahar procession of the Pattini Dewala.
The Gajanayaka Nilame of the Sri Maha Pattini Dewala is the first official to go in the leading elephant of the procession, and this is Sita, belonging to Mr. S.M. Roshan Patirana of Maharagam. Sita is quite a special elephant of the Sri Mahapattini Dewala Pirahara, as she was one of the fortunate female elephants to have the chance of carrying the godly ornaments back in the year 2014.
The Pantera Dancers, clad in yellow, represent the color attributed to goddess Pattini, representing serenity and tranquility, as she is known as the goddess of chastity.
This is also another segment which reflects the agrarian culture which prevailed in Sri Lanka back then. And this is the first time we see a group of mixed folk dancers, both male and female.
This dance depicts the activities of paddy harvesting. As they carry the sickles, the winnowing fans, and the pots, representing movements of fetching water, picking the paddy from the heap of grains,
Indeed, this shows the unique culture that grew in our country, centered on the rice plant.
Following this troupe of dancers, we have the young Pillumale. Pillumale belongs to the Pinnamal Elephant Orphanage and is one of the 3 participants that take part annually in the Kandy Esala Perahera, representing the Pinnamal Elephant Orphanage in Kegol.
Now we see a beautiful female Chamara dancing troupe. As you can see, the beauty of the Pattini Dewala procession is magnified by the joining of these beautiful female dancers, adorned in vibrant attire and unique head accessories.
They also engage in the act of fanning the upcoming casket or the godly ornaments of goddess Pattini.
This elephant, small in size comparatively, but yet calm and majestic in its walk, is Bandara, belonging to Mr. Kitsiri Katapitiya of Horana.
The classical Candian dancers. This is the feminine representation of the classical West dance.
These dancers take on the streets of the Candian kingdom with such beauty and grace, paying no heed to their gentle souls. They are indeed proud and honored to be a part of this Dalada procession by being the only female representation.
Female representation in the Sri Mahapattini Dewala Perahera is also visible in terms of the elephants taking part. And this is one such example, Manika, belonging to Mrs. Shriyani Gunawardana of Dangovita.
We are now seeing the first West dancing troupe of the Pattini Dewala procession.
In fact, this is the West Dance troupe, which is led by Mithun Bandara.
This dance form, which reflects the true Candian culture, has dancers adorned in a very unique outfit, which consists of 64 different pieces of accessories and has now become an icon of our beautiful country.
It is also considered sacred because the headgear consists of an inner ornament which is in the shape of a dagaba or the reliquary that carries the relics.
this is the most precious segment in the Pattini Dewala procession. We now see the chief trustee of the Pattini Dewala taking the streets.
And as usual, the ceremonial elephant of the Sri Mahapattini Dewalaya is none other than Mangala. Mangala belongs to Mr. Udara Galapatti of Kiriyula, who has been serving in this role for a large number of years. And Mangala is accompanied by Menike belonging to Mr. HRS Nishanka of Kegol, alongside with Rani belonging to Mr. Richard Gonakumbura of Balangoda.
And this is the second troop of West dancers in the Pattini Dewala procession, led by Chandana K. Jayaratna.
West dancing has three main regional styles. But here in the Kandy Pirahera, only the Candian tradition is represented. The other two being Satara Korala and Sat Korala.
And as we can see, the technique focuses on dynamism and powerful footwork. We see these West dancers line the path in which they dance in two files of dancers to pay respect to the Basnaik Nilame of the Pattini Dewalaya.
As usual, culminating in a faster, vigorous and energetic set of movements, the dancers fall back to the simple movement, bringing the tempo back to its normal levels.
And these Nilames are Mr. A.W.S. Bandaranayaka representing the Shrine Ambekka Sri Kadaragama Dewale, and Mr. Walter Parahitiyavathanne from Matale Ambokka Pattini Dewale. These two Nilames are representing the Basnaik Nilame of Pattini Dewale today in the 4th Randoli procession. Providing the protection to the Nilames of the rural shrines, we see the guards walking behind them. And now we see the palanquins of the 4 Dewales being carried out right after the procession. The palanquins of the 4 Dewales, Natha, Vishnu, Kataragama and Pattini, are now being taken in the procession as the last item.
What you just witnessed was the conclusion of the 4th Randoli Perahera.
Let there be timely rains that will bring life-giving water to our fields and ensure a bountiful harvest.
May our country prosper. Dalada Samidu Pihitai.
සෙන්කණ්ඩ ශෛලපුර විරාජමාන වූ මුතුන් මල්කට බඳු දළදා සමිඳු වැඳ අවසර ගන්නේ උතුම් පෙරහැර කරුණ වහන්සේ ගජ තේජසින් යුතුව වැඩම වීමට පින් ලැබේ